For landlords, by landlords. The Rent Perfect Podcast with David Pickron.
Hey, we're back at it behind the microphones here at the Rent Perfect Podcast. I have Scott Aubrey with me. I know he's doing great. I don't even have to ask him that.
Exactly.
I'm doing pretty dang good myself.
I was going to ask.
Let's just roll right in with a question. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Have you ever heard of the term, and I know you have because, you know, you've got wisdom and you've been around a long time. Give someone an inch, and they will take
a mile. Yeah.
I want to talk about that today.
As a survivor of 4 teenagers, they're all in their 20s now, I have firsthand real-life experience with this. You know, it's every decision we made as parents, I think, was interpreted that way by our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's a great point. I mean, this is a great way to roll into our topic today is raising kids. You make a rule. Now, I understand as a parent, you are the executive branch of your family, the legislative branch of your family, and the judicial, pretty much making you a dictator of your family.
It's a pretty awesome spot to be in.
But let's talk about when you're kids and you made some rules. Did they always follow those rules to the exactness?
No. So let me give an example here. When my kids first got their driver's license, I bought a little Toyota 2-door pickup truck, no power anything. I think I had an AM/FM radio, but no power windows, no power locks. And the rule was this: you can have one other person in the car with the truck with you at any given time. If at any time I see more than one person in the car, or if there's ever kids riding in the bed of the truck, you lose privileges. Okay. How long do you think that lasted for?
Well, Scott, knowing your kids, they just totally
They were
minded.
pretty good. They were pretty good, but there were a time or two.
Pickron kids, they would have kids hanging off the truck. Aubrey kids.
Yeah, there was a time or two where I caught them with, violations of that. And there was always their creative, well, I know, but Dad, she needed a ride home and my buddy and I were already in the truck, and what, were we just going to leave her?
Right.
Or the time when they decided to turn the bed of the truck into a hot tub with a tarp. And they're like, but we weren't driving very fast. I'm like, but you had 8 people and about 4,000 gallons of water in the back of the truck.
Way overloaded.
Right. And they in their minds, they just can't understand, like, why are you getting upset about this?
Right.
Well, it's because you interpreted the rule to fit you when that wasn't really the rule. Right.
And the reality is you put those rules out there with your kids. First of all, if there's one other kid in the car, I'm sure there's a couple of reasons. Yeah. One is distractions. Mm-hmm. Kids in the back seat yelling and screaming and putting your hands on your eyes while you're driving.
Right.
Right. All these distractions.
Wait, you're talking like we've done this before.
Yeah. Well, I was a really good follower of the rules too. But and then if God forbid they ever got in an accident or something, you didn't have a car full of kids, right?
Right. Or a truck bed full of 8 kids
But up and over protecting our own kids, we have these rules on the road to protect other people. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we worry about A and B, but we don't see what happens with C, D, E, and F. And so today I want to talk about a case that actually came through the Supreme Court this year that a lot of people didn't talk about. But with Trump winning this election is an absolute game changer and probably the most important piece that came out of the Supreme Court this year. Yeah. And it's called the Chevron Deference. Okay? Let me give you a little backdrop of the Chevron Deference. Chevron Deference says it supports there are 3 branches of the government: mm-hmm. judicial, legislative, executive. Legislative makes the rules. But what has happened over the years is this Chevron case back in the day, the executive branch started loosely interpreting the legislative's intent, kind of like our kids do with those rules, right? Yep. And, you gave them an inch, and then they took a mile, and soon the executive branch really got out of control. And the case that went to the Supreme Court was the EPA required regulators to go on these fishing boats and made the fishermen pay for the regulator. So every time you went out fishing, you had some government employee that's going to sit there with his board and make sure you do everything exactly the way they want you to fish.
And then you had to pay for it.
And then you had to pay for
Even
it. So
better,
then ultimately they said, well, we can't afford the regulator with the money we're making from fishing, so now we can't go out. So they make this rule to make sure you're fishing correctly, and their C, D, and E down the road is now we can't even fish and supply the food.
We're killing that industry, right?
That needs to come in. And so the Supreme Court said, hey, we are not going to allow the executive branch now to go willy-nilly, if I can use a term that way, and get loose with what the legislature has, governed and passed. And you no longer have the ability to loosely interpret. You need to closely interpret as closely as possible to what the legislature told you. If you need a change, you need to go to the legislature to do it. Now, we know our government gets locked up real easy, and it's actually in our benefit. And I think our founding fathers knew, hey, if we could really make only the important things pass and all this little stuff kind of get locked up, we're going to be in good shape. Yeah. But since the executive branch noticed, hey, it's going to take us forever to get this through Congress, just go ahead and do it yourself, right? Because our government picks what they want to do, and then they say, hey, attorneys, how do I get there? Not can I get there, but how do I get there?
Yeah, find a path for it.
I mean, how many times have you heard a president say, I don't have the authority to do that? And then 6 months later, he's doing it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because some attorney went through and said, I think we can get away. And if we get caught, we're going to get sued, and we'll take it to the courts. But we'll have done this for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we're okay, right? I mean, when you or I get sued, right, we have to pay that bill.
Right.
When the federal government gets sued, nobody has to pay that bill.
I think we get to pay that bill again somehow. Yeah.
We have to pay that bill. And so this doctrine that now is in place, in a way, also limits Trump from all these executive orders saying, wait a minute, you need to get this through Congress before you act. So it's reining in our government.
Which is a great thing.
Which is fantastic. In fact, people in Virginia need to be really scared right now because he has tapped Musk and Ramaswamy to go through each of these departments and just get rid of all of this excess spending, regulations. And if you don't think the government is trying to take over the job industry, just go look at the last job numbers. They accounted for 40% of the jobs created last quarter into our federal government. Yeah. We don't need that thing bigger.
No.
And why do you think we need all these people? It's because all this dumb regulation that they keep adding and adding, and we need people to oversee and oversight, right?
Which no employer wants, which no business owner wants, right? We don't need or want that.
Right.
Just in an effort to create more jobs. I was looking at something, and since in the last 50 years, there's been 240 federal agencies created. That's a lot of jobs. That's not just one guy running that. That's as with government, there's thousands and thousands of people that populate that, right? So,
and I don't mean to go off to a side note here, Scott, but I'm in South Carolina a couple weeks ago, which, by the way, Charleston, South Carolina is one of the most beautiful places.
You told me we're moving. We're moving headquarters.
If I had to leave Arizona, that's where I would go. So shout out to you guys in Charleston, South Carolina for having just a beautiful place. But I went into a Subway there, walking down the road with my family. One gal is working the whole Subway, taking your orders. You've got DoorDash people coming in, Uber Eats. They're like, she's like, sir, I haven't even got to your guys' order yet. She's got a line out the door inside the thing. And she just says, we can't find anybody. I go down to, we eat dinner another night at a bar. The bartender comes out around the bar, takes our order, goes back, serves all the drinks, delivers our food. I said, hey, can I pay you now? No, get it later. Then I have to wait while he's serving up, all
the other patrons
to get my and then I'm like, hey, did someone not show up? He's like, we can't find anybody to work. I take my daughter up to Columbus, Ohio. She gets a job at Estee Lauder or somewhere. I call her. I say, hey, how'd your first week go? She's like, well, we weren't open Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday because we didn't have enough employees to open up the doors at our retail place. And here I am, and here in Arizona is the same way.
Yeah.
When you're adding people to this government dole all the time, I think we're also taking away jobs from the private
sector.
market. So we're almost competing now against the government. And I think now if we come in and we kind of say, hey, we don't need all these positions, I can tell you people in Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C., there are plenty of jobs out there. Everybody's hiring. You don't need to work for the government your whole life. But anyways, off on a tangent there. But this is just kind of where we're going. So in the real estate world, what do you think we can expect if the federal government is now under this kind of operation like it should have been in the past? Right? Legislature makes the rules, executive branch, executes the rules. I think it's going to get really good for us.
Yeah. I love tightening up things where it's much more uniform, and rather than just this, back to your willy-nilly term, right, interpretation of well, I think they meant this.
But here's what's scary, and this is kind of where I wanted to go. You need to be more fearful of your local government now than your federal government, okay? We used to always worry about what's the federal government doing, but lately, over the last 10 to 15 years, we have seen these city councils, state legislatures or governors just make some crazy rules, and this Chevron Deference only covers federal, right? Somehow we got to get that mindset to travel down to the states.
And so municipalities, yes.
It is more important than ever, even though this federal government, I believe, is getting reined in. And we will see. Scott, there are people out there going, Dave, you're hoping, you're wishing. We will see, but this is the direction I think we're going after researching and studying and talking to a lot of people out in our field. But I will tell you, you need to still invest in states that kind of have that same value of let the legislature legislate and let the executive branch execute those. Because, I mean, I could already see in Arizona where we went blue in 2020, back to red in 2024. But I can already see some of these more liberal cities around Arizona starting to do source of income, right?
Yeah.
And starting to do things on a local level that we were fighting on the national level, but we've lost on the local level. So make sure that, though this is great things are happening on the federal level, make sure you're investing in areas where that local level is just as conservative and has, your mind.
It's supportive of what we're trying to do as landlords,
so
right?
that's a great way to put it. Supporting
the investing community. Yeah.
So we're not out of the woods, but we're certainly well on their way, and I hope that there is this tune in our country to get back to where the founding father said, we're going to create a great country.
Yes.
And I'm not saying we're not a great country, and I'm not even saying that some of the things that people we need to take care of need to happen. I think all that social welfare, some of it is necessary, but it's just getting out of hand.
Yeah, those controls are in place for a reason. They were designed that way for a reason. Getting back to them is just going to benefit everybody in the country.
Absolutely. So be fearful of your local government, and if you're fearful of your local government now, spend your time supporting candidates in your local area that are going to support us. So now it's time for all of us around the country to say, okay, federal, which kind of I feel like sometimes in the federal, I can't do anything about it. It's too big. Yeah. But certainly local government, I can be very active in that. And so we're on a roll. It's turning our way. Now is not the time to sit back and go, oh, okay, all fixed, all done. We need to continue to shape our local politics. And until next time, continue to rent. Perfect.